Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on another eventful morning in the silver market, in the financial markets, the political markets, and really, I guess more so than ever since I started doing a show. A very important time in the world with the things that are happening. And well, fortunately, to dig into that today, I'm joined by Rob Kientz of Gold Silver Pros, the man, the legend. I know everybody at home knows Rob now, quite a superstar in the gold and silver industry. And Rob, welcome on in. It's good to see you. How are you today?
Doing very good, Chris. It's been a while since I've been on the show and happy to be back.
Yeah, and I see, what's that, a Rahib Ismail jersey in the background? Is that a Cowboys jersey, Rob?
Yeah, he played for my two favorite teams, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and then went on to play for the Cowboys. So,
okay, well,
and it's signed. We got it signed for my birthday a couple of years ago. Yeah, one of my prized possessions.
My guess is if he had ended up on my New York Jets, probably the jersey wouldn't be hanging on your wall right now. But Rob, at least you can tell me about the playoffs this year, perhaps. So great to see you again. And also joining us is Andrew Pollard of BlackRock Silver. One of the people that I might add makes this show possible. So Andrew is one of the sponsors to the show and someone who's really supported what we've done. It's great to have you here. And how are you today, sir?
It's been an eventful morning so far in the markets, hasn't it? It's good to be here.
Yeah, and I'll pull up. There is BlackRock Silver at blackrocksilver.com. And Andrew, we're going to have plenty to talk about. We're going to dig into silver as the commodity, the inflation, some of the other things going on. We'll take questions. And also, if people do have questions about BlackRock in particular, hopefully you can answer those as well before we wrap up today, Andrew.
Love to. Yeah, let's get this show on the road.
All right. And again, Gold Silver Pros. There is Rob. Rob, is that the suit you were wearing when you called Jeff Christian an asshole in public?
It's the very one, yes.
I was there.
Andrew, you were there? Did you get his autograph?
Yeah, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's the place to be when you're calling out the silver manipulators.
Now, Andrew, I know Jeff Christian says silver isn't manipulated, despite on the biggest inflation report in history, they even spoofed it below the $22 level so they could stop more customers out. That's Jeff Christian's friends.
Well, if you looked at when they actually did it, they started tanking. Well, the market started tanking about five minutes or so before the numbers came out. So either someone's got a magic crystal ball or they're very lucky. But yeah, there you go.
Andrew, come on, buddy. Fed governors and Goldman Sachs executives, they got to eat too. They got to get their cut before Jeff Curry goes and hammers futures on the COMEX. But I know everybody has things to do. And since also, thanks to the supporters like Andrew and our guests like Rob Kientz, after we finish up here, I'll get back to organizing my legal file, which would be many lawyers' wet dream, in my own personal opinion, because in addition to having his own comments confirming that he tamped down the market policy, yes, that's the CFTC regulator. We're going to get, Andrew, I'm going to get it all tidied up. Your lawyers will love it. People at home who want to reclaim damages, because certainly it's unfortunate that you have such a corrupt era. And Rob, but perhaps we could start with you today, because part of the reason this moves pattern seems a little counterintuitive is that this morning we found out wholesale prices. So this is the stuff, before it goes into the consumer prices, and perhaps some could consider a leading indicator of CPI, which we got last week, 6.8%. Now we see wholesale prices measure rose 9.6% in November from a year ago. And actually, Andrew, since I know you're a silver man yourself, can you read this part?
The fastest pace on record.
Which would imply that all of the silly silver bugs who were saying Jerome Powell was an outright fool, in addition to being a corrupt liar and a moron when he claimed that inflation was going to be transitory, is now officially like that debate is done. I mean, we don't need to wait for the clock is over on that.
No. Rob? The new spin is that inflation is actually good.
That's right. Well, it has to be good because that's modern monetary theory. That's money printing, right? We're in the era where they're going to print money. So they have to spin it as inflation's good. Inflation can't be bad.
Yeah.
And it's bad everywhere. I mean, you have this 9.6% print this morning in the US. So we know higher CPI is coming. And then you had a 13.5 PPI in China last month. So they have higher prices coming. So it's not just in the US, it's everywhere.
Yeah, but Rob, keep in mind, this pace was even faster than the 9.2% estimate that comes from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. So even their calculators couldn't keep up with this one.
No. Well, I don't believe any of the calculators any of them are using. I think it's actually higher than that, in my opinion. It's higher than 9.6%. That's the number that they let the public see.
As a mining executive, anytime I can exceed market expectations on something, normally that's a good thing. In a situation like this, it's you don't really want to be number one. And in this case, I mean, everyone knows it. I mean, when the CPI numbers came out last week and saying 6-7%, that's a made up number. If they were to use the same the same internals that they used in the 70s for that same number, it would have been 14%, correct? Here, the producer prices, what actual the makers of goods are feeling, and will eventually get passed on to customers. If they're saying it's 9.7%, yeah, that's the low end of things. I mean, anyone that goes that excludes the price, that excludes gas and food prices, right? So, still that feels like a lot more reasonable number than the 6. Either way, it's us who feels it at the end of the day, and yeah, somewhere's making money when you see the market move the way it did this morning.
I think that's very well put. Rob, what would you say to that last part, that as someone who's studied this for decades now, that when these things are engineered, we find out later someone is making money. We found out that many of these Fed governors were the ones making the money. So while they're taking an oath from a non-public institution and they're regulating the alleged world's reserve currency, they were front running. And then
that's right. The Fed admitted they were trading stocks or selling stocks that they held, ahead of their own announcements. And when you're setting monetary policy and for the world's reserve currency, and that money is what's pumping up the stock market to these unreal valuations that, by the way, are second highest in history. The highest stock valuation PDE ratio was the tech crisis, and we know what happened there. Then you had the Great Depression, you had the mortgage crisis. So every time we get these really high priced earnings in the stock market, it crashes. So, but that's money printing that's a central bank era. So they're printing money, pumps up the stocks, they sell out, they make an announcement, they get out before the announcement of, what their policy is going to be. They're front running. And of course, all the banks know this as well. The banks are the ones that trade, so they have all the trading data. So that's how they make money on shorting the metals. They can short the metals today and make money trading against their own book, their own clients, make money trading against the market because they already know what the print was going to be. They're expecting people to go long on a high inflation print. They go short, they've washed people out, they make their money that way. And that's what these big market participants do.
Yeah, well, it's if you look at the silver prices just for this year, we're pretty much right back down to the 52-week lows. I mean, just slightly above where we ended up in September. So it's nice to see support there. What you're seeing too is that, this is a big data week. Last week was the CPI numbers. Obviously today's moved the market, but tomorrow's, the big kahuna when it comes to the actual Fed statement. And what you're seeing now, anytime the market moves this way, it means that things are getting priced in. And what's getting priced in for tomorrow is that they're obviously going to take a very hawkish approach to tapering, which, they'd already been jawboning that, going into this anyway. So I'm looking at the risk reward of how things are trading now. I'm thinking, well, hell, maybe it's actually not a bad time to look at picking up some more, just because, anytime something's priced in, it's not really going to move. It's going to move if they don't live up to expectations. And I think tomorrow has got a chance to see things go the other way.
I appreciate you mentioning that, Andrew, because what an exciting meeting that should be, with the Fed in the face of this. Now and we'll come back to that, what might actually be going on, why they're going to raise interest rates. If they're raising interest rates because the reset has already begun, they know these levels are being reset, because even Paul Krugman, after 12 shots of Jägermeister, is smart enough to know that when you raise rates, that's the end of the financial system as we know it. And Rob, like you talked about before, all these assholes front run everything. And that's why we'll save about the legal file for later, because that'll be special. But Andrew, you talked about the CPI, and I was wondering if you could read this headline. I thought, I couldn't tell if they were kidding at first, but I thought this would be an insightful one for investors to know about on this record setting day.
I feel like I'm back in elementary school. Yes, teacher. Hot November inflation report was probably the best White House could have hoped for at this point. The best.
And Andrew, take maybe bullet point number
Biden's
2, if
Christmas
you would.
gift to everyone, that you'll pay more for Christmas gifts. That's his way of being merry. Yes. Yeah, go on.
Well, I just hear with the supply chain shortage, maybe if people don't get Christmas gifts because they're not available, especially a lot of the electronics, which requires silver, and we'll get to how this is affecting the silver situation. But maybe people don't buy gifts, or because it's such a struggle for so many people just to pay for food now, they can't afford it. Now, next month, when the CPI comes out, they can say, hey, prices went down. But Andrew, could you read bullet point number 2 here? Because I think that's also insightful.
Virtually every economist expects inflation to stay high for the foreseeable future. Some had worried that inflation could have leapt as high as 7%.
So basically, after 12 years following the housing bubble, we heard Ben Bernanke tell us about the circle of virtuosity that was going to unfold that we're all still waiting for. Janet Yellen told us it was great. Jerome Powell told us it was great. Janet Yellen betrays the country and the world by then destroying any perceived boundaries of independence, goes to the Fed, tells us it's great. They told us it was transitory. Now even Bank of America is realizing it's not fucking transitory. Is there any mysteries left, Rob, or is this just actually as big of a 3-card Monty as you and I have been saying since we've started our damn shows?
Yeah, it's all, it's the bread and circus of the ancient Romans. They distract you and say, don't look over here, look over here, we'll give you bread, we'll give you universal basic income, or we'll give you, now I'm getting child tax credit payments directly into my bank account from the IRS, and I don't want them. They're forcing it in my bank account. And I get this every month. It's the bread and circus. Let's give you a little bit of money so you don't get too upset. We'll entertain you over here, but don't pay attention to what's going on. Meanwhile, the guys that are running all of these agencies, not only the banks, but the government, they're in collusion. They're running it. They're stealing the money out the back door. They're putting a bunch of IUs in place that we're all, supposedly responsible for. So we're going to be responsible as citizens for the big mess when it collapses. And I have a problem with that because I never signed up for any of this garbage. And if you go back to US Constitution, we're not supposed to have any of this garbage. So all of it, this system was put in place from the beginning to enrich the few, enrich the banks, and give them the advantage. And the government have been colluding in it because it's how they, that's how they get financed. It's how they finance government. So if you want to be in government and you want government to grow and you want your power to grow and you want, to make more money, this is how you do it. And this has been the case, throughout history. It's no different in the US now than it always has been. This cycle has repeated, in various countries. It's just where we are right now in the US. And the thing that we have to do is just educate people so that people can prepare. I think we're past the point of no return. I think the system's going to collapse as it's currently constructed. But we have to educate people so that they can make choices to help themselves deal with it financially, so that they're not so destroyed when it happens. My parents lived through the Great Depression. And I can tell you, and my father was in World War II. He landed on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. And I can tell you, listening, to their stories, that's not a time that a lot of people fondly remember. And what we have to do is help people prepare ahead of time so that we can get, help as many people as we can, so that when that time happens, we have the big reset, we have the big crash, and people at least be somewhat prepared for this. And what you do, Chris, is really instrumental, because you point out on your show, like you said, you put your information file together. You've got all of this evidence. You're constantly calling all these regulatory agencies and exposing them for not doing their job, and what that does is it creates this criminal liability. And so it's hanging out there. So you've done a lot of work. And now it's just a matter of people saying, okay, here are the criminals, one, we got to protect ourselves, but two, we got to go after the criminals. And that's the other big piece of it. And you're doing a great job of that. And I appreciate, Andrew, for supporting you and your mission as well.
Well, thank you, Rob. And
am I supporting you in your mission or on your lifestyle down there in Mexico?
Well, actually,
either way, I'm happy to be a part of this chapter in history.
Although I'll tell you what, I've been saving a fortune by leaving the U.S. I mean, my cost of living has gone down drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been trying to get across, although I think it's hard for people to grasp because it's like, because I'm at the pool or somewhere nice, it seems like, well, he's like, but this is costing infinitely less. There are people that I've seen in Mexico. They make like $200 a week. They go eat food. They have fun with their friends. They have drinks at night. They dance. They wake up. This way we've grown up in the US and Canada and Australia and Europe, that's not natural. And this is where it comes from. And Rob, you talked about some of the criminals who facilitate that. And I didn't want to leave out bullet number 3 because Alex Lynn of Bank of America, anyone associated with that shithole, I think deserves some special attention because Rob, let's take this fool. You tell me fool, liar, or if you can come up with another category. But Bank of America economist Alex Lynn said that while it's time to stop calling inflation transitory, he thinks inflation could peak around March or April. Rob, what are the chances of that actually happening?
0 chance. And, Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank said the same thing. She came with this goofy video the other day. They said, oh, inflation is going to be a hump, and it was the stupidest thing ever. I put it on Twitter and I gave her our 4th Market Clown Award.
It's clearly not done humping yet. Look at that.
It's not done pumping. These are all, we call them clowns. What they really are is they're the guys, Alex Lynn, these types of guys are the ones that are covering for the guys. He's a bankster and they're covering for the people robbing the economy blind, and he gets his money along the way. They give him a nice title, they give him some money, maybe buy him a nice house, let him fly on the jet whenever he wants. And he sells, his soul to the devil and sells out the American public, but he's not the top rung of this. The top rung of this are all these banks and all these government officials who are colluding to do all that.
Hey, Rob, do you think this 4,949 contract swap that Bank of America did with JP Morgan, which I could check again, but at least I remember when I made that video about Goldman and JP Morgan routinely violating the CME and the CFTC position limits. We can review those too, if anyone needs that. Last I checked, it was 3,000 for silver. So not only is it kind of hard to understand why Bank of America would be issuing almost 5,000 contracts, but I believe that's over the limit. So when you say that this guy, Alex Lynn, gets a nice position, economist at banks, I had the unfortune of doing an internship at Merrill Lynch. So I know the economists, they're not revenue generators. So they have to be funded somewhere. And what do you think are the chances anyone at Bank of America would like to join me on the show to discuss this one, Rob?
Yeah, position limits. I've never seen position limits enforced. I want to make a point that you're looking at their house account. This isn't their client account, so they can't claim that they're trading this for clients. It's for their own internal trading on this report. And where the hell is the CFTC in this? The CFTC was created to monitor all this stuff, but you have Rostin Benham admitting in public at Boca V that he manipulates the market down. So if he's willing to manipulate the price and the flow of trade on the silver market, I'm sure he's willing to look the other way when people are breaking the rules in terms of position limits and basically price setting, because he was part of it. And he's the regulator. He's not even the trader, and he's the regulator. And he was coordinating, back when we had silver squeeze, he was coordinating the tamp down of silver price at $30 because it didn't benefit who? Who trades the markets? It's the banks and the hedge fund. The hedge funds don't take physical delivery. So it's the banks that have an interest, right? It's the bullion banks. And it's clowns like Alex that go on CNBC and these other shows and publications, supposedly reputable publications like CNBC, and they're the ones that do the covering. And I'm sure they get something out of it.
Well, Rob, we can touch on CNBC later. I was thinking about them yesterday. I've had some ongoing dialogue, and because I told someone I've been in who contacted me, it's about 2 or 3 years ago when they heard of the Bart Chilton interview. This is when the JP Morgan guys were getting arrested. She contacted me initially. I sent a lot of the evidence. There was no follow-up. Then after Jeff Curry of Goldman Sachs, also part of the LBMA, where I believe some of their officials are facing RICO charges, when he blatantly lied multiple times in that first week of February to run cover for the crime that occurred on Silver Tuesday, I mentioned this to the CNBC person. This guy committed felonies on your show. I've submitted this to the fraudulent CFTC. You wear that. Does anyone care there? No answer, no answer. Follow up a couple months later. She said that she had sent it to someone else. And he asked, actually, the person, she said, I guess her supervisor, and she asked if there had been any response from the CFTC after I followed up my letter, which you heard last week, to Donna Falk-White, the media director, who now is a defendant for the rest of her lifetime. Just like anybody who was in that stupid Senate confirmation hearing for Ross Benham. Now I will take my time to organize my legal file. I have volunteers. So any person who sat in that room and put their hand on a Bible and swore an oath will receive the evidence. And they can either stop Ross Benham from doing this shit, or then they will be a defendant. And if they have still not been tried for their crimes by the time I'm dead, I will make sure instructions have been left behind so that whoever is still living will make sure that this does not happen again. Andrew, as someone who is trying to you've actually figured out how to overcome these challenges in an industry that's been so abused by the regulators and these banks that most people have been washed out. And in a sense, it's nice because you see, and Rob, you tell me if you agree with this, the companies that are still left and have good projects are there because they've learned how to become more efficient and how to do things properly and not an easy environment. So Andrew, any of that you might like to comment on?
Well, listen, it's the mining industry in general, certainly precious metals, certainly silver and gold. I mean, got to be the most hated sector on the planet right now. Certainly one of them. I mean, but so was oil about a year and a half ago too, right? And all of a sudden, you go from most hated to most loved real quick. Now, I'm not a trader. I'm here to build fundamental. What we're doing as a mining exploration and near-term developer isn't rocket science. We take something, we try and add value with it through drilling, through proving up ounces, by de-risking it, and hopefully eventually selling it or putting it into production. Now, we've been very fortunate because we've gotten our hands on one of what we consider to be the most substantial new and, well, bringing life to one of the most substantial silver discoveries of the last 100 years. And now we're showing that there's a lot more goodness left there. And it's been really straightforward. So, I mean, in 1 year, we've, just between January and where we are right now, we've drilled 80,000 meters in the middle of Nevada, halfway between Las Vegas and Reno, making this, easily one of the top 3 or 4 most active silver exploration projects on the planet. And that's because we've got the goods. Now, I don't really care if silver's $20 or $25 today, because we're certainly a few years away from potentially extracting what we prove up there. Now, in a low-cost environment, our value proposition gets even higher because we're a high-grade story. We've got silver and gold, and the grades are bonanza. It's the low grade, the optionality plays, which all of a sudden lose all their luster. Ours is going to be, projected to be a high-margin producer at really any price. So, I think it's all about trying to, if you just want to go with the market, buy ounces, buy actual silver ounces, keep them in your safe. If you want to outperform the market and get leverage to the market, get a company that is going to give you that optionality or that leverage. And I was listening to a speaker the other day. They said that 80% of precious metals companies right now that trade on the exchanges are trading at or near their 52-week lows. The GDXJ, the Junior Gold Mining Index, Gold Miners Index, is off 25% year after year. Now, I'm looking at that from a risk-reward basis. I think that's a hell of a time. Now, whether things start moving in a few days, a few months, or this time next year, doesn't matter. But I don't want to be on the wrong side of that trade, because when silver goes, it goes. In March of 2019, silver was $12. When we picked our project up, silver was 12, $13. By July, it was French kissing 30. So, days like this, I call waking up sometimes my Great Depression. But ultimately, I've got the big picture, and the big picture is, as long as I'm not trading and looking to get rich quick, as long as I'm doing what eventually you can't hold down that spring. It's like jumping into a pool with a big, ball, like a big beach ball. The deeper you go, the higher it's going to fly up, and when it does, watch out.
Yeah, that's
well.
I was going to say that's the number one thing to think about when you're investing in stock, especially mining stocks. We're super undervalued in this area right now, and eventually that does change. It always changes. When the metals go up, the mining stocks will go up. But the number one thing I tell people is, if you're going to get into it, don't get into it for a week or a month or even 3 or 4 months. It takes time to develop these projects. But when you get in early in a company like a BlackRock, that gives you so much upside that you want to stay in. It's just so you get paid all at once, right? You don't get paid along the way. You get paid for your patience, and then boom, the price rises. You guys get close to making that mining decision, and that's where all the money comes in. And that's just the nature of the business, So don't be impatient with these mining stocks. Treat them as, they should be treated. They're creating tremendous value. And especially, the Tonopah project there in Nevada is creating tremendous value. And that's going to have a lot of money in it for investors, but just be patient, hang with it for a while. The gold and silver price will go up. You guys will get your project built. It's going to be very attractive. Either you guys are going to build it or somebody's going to take you out along the way, one of the two, as you get all your resources. And it's going to be great for investors either way. And so getting in now is the perfect thing. That's what you want to do. You want to buy low and sell high.
Yeah, well, and if 80% of precious metals companies' stocks are trading at their 52-week lows, you want to look at the ones that are outperforming the market, no matter how tepid that market may be. And in our case, I think this time last year, I was speaking Canadian dollars because I follow our stock chart there more closely, but I think we were around 62 cents, 60, 62, 63 cents. I think that was our 52-week low all year. And that's when silver was $25. Now here we are, about a year later, and we're trading in the mid 80s right now. So even though the price of silver has crashed, even though everyone else has gone down, we're trading well beyond our lows. And just a few weeks ago, we were well north of $1. And that's just the rising tide raises and lifts all boats. But certain ones, can contribute to a tidal wave when everything's going up against going in the right direction. And we've outperformed the market. Obviously, I'd wish we were even higher. But that said, we're not raising money right now. We're just deploying capital into the ground, and all of that is that big beach ball going deeper and deeper and deeper into the water. And when the tides do start coming back, I think that's when the waves really start moving.
Yeah, and a question for you, Rob, as since we're already talking some BlackRock here. Something Andrew mentioned earlier about how, the price, it affects his share price, but in terms of ounces in the ground, it's going to stay there. He's not going to be selling. I don't think there's any, Andrew, I don't think you'll have the chance to sell metal at $20 or $30. I don't see how that's mathematically possible.
No.
I'll go back to Washington and set up a tent outside Ross Benham's office before that happens. So now at the same time, we've seen First Majestic and Endeavor withhold production. I believe Endeavor, and I believe they've both done it multiple separate quarters now. Andrew, does that sound correct to you, Rob?
Yeah, but both of those have. And another thing First Majestic's done is write checks into my company as well, twice this last year. So I like what they're doing.
See, it seems like if you had Keith Neumeyer against Ross Benham or Jeff Curry in a match of chess, I think that they'd spill their pieces over the board before the game started. But Rob, what would you say though? Is it an advantage to me? I would almost prefer a silver company that, if they can't for whatever reason sell the metal at these low prices, I mean, to me that's a good thing. I'd rather take my time, despite the nonsense and the silliness of this morning. If you can adjust your time horizon, I mean, that's what I've been doing with the options where all right, fine, maybe we'll do this again tomorrow. But if I buy options for next year or 6 months out, then you can turn these spoofs or drops, which I might add, now that I've started more option trading recently, I see this happening in every stock. It's not just silver. But again, it's kind of like that shift from what we think should happen or is fair to accepting what is, then recalibrating around that. And again, in that sense, where if you have companies that can't or are refusing to sell metal at prices that make no sense in the face of this, I actually see that as a benefit, although I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, Rob.
Yeah, right now what companies like BlackRock are doing is they're banking silver. You're just banking it, right? You're banking it for later, and you're banking it for when it's going to be more valuable. It's not unlike stackers who, grab our silver. I've got a little bit of silver shot here at my desk that I keep, just to remind me of the best investment in the world. It's not unlike people who stack it or just, wait, it's a generational investment. And you do the same with the mining companies. You find the ones that do it the best. You find the ones that have good projects and good management, and you stack those companies. But what the companies give you that the metals don't is leverage. So you're going to do even better. So this is an opportunity. When you see the mining stocks trading at 52-week lows, like Andrew was mentioning, 80% of them, certainly BlackRock is not, it's outperforming. There are a few companies that are outperforming, but when you see the entire index go down like that, that's when you buy, because what are you doing? You're stacking cheap silver ounces, but you're not just stacking cheap silver ounces. You're stacking the leverage to that's going to come from owning that stock. So certainly you want to stack your silver, and you want to stack your silver companies, stack your gold companies. And then you just wait for, the time is going to come, when the prices rise and everything's rosy. And like I said, that's when you make your money. But it's an historic buying opportunity right now. It's nothing to complain about at all. I mean, we're not going to see this opportunity in silver in particular, maybe for another 100 years, I don't think.
And it's important to realize that, what we're talking about this morning is the paper market. That's not the same as silver itself.
Right.
Silver itself, I mean, the Silver Institute just came out, I think, a month ago with their updated forecast for next year, and they're showing that consumption of actual raw silver is going to go up by another 15%. That's at the same time you've already reached peak silver. At the same time, you're seeing all this geopolitical risks down in Mexico, down in Peru. Both governments are either looking at taking away existing mines from some of the largest silver primary producers on the planet, or not renewing licenses to allow them to keep mining. What happens if the largest silver producers, by jurisdictionally, stop becoming places where miners want to invest in? Well, obviously they produce less silver. There's less of a target on their back, and there's more of a target on companies like mine who aren't in Latin and South and Central America. They're in Nevada on private land, next to a highway and walking distance to an A&W. There's, all I'm saying is that the paper markets, all the spoofing, all of that, I mean, that's all well and good, but the map is not the territory. Ultimately, silver is a commodity. It's got industrial uses. It's obviously got the retail trading aspect of it as well, the precious metals aspect to it as well. But it's got supply and demand inputs just the same as oil does, just the same as any other commodity on the planet does. And you're seeing declining silver production, you're seeing increased consumption, and you're seeing pretty much what you'd expect to be the perfect storm brewing in terms of when you'd expect things to really start moving. The question is, are we in the middle of the storm right now and things seem a little calm, or are we just on the outskirts and waiting for everything to hit the fan? Either way, I'm very happy showing building ounces in the ground, as Rob said, with our drilling, because that's what we're doing. We're stacking ounces, but they're in the ground. It's the best safe in the world because no one can get them. So when the time is right, that's when we can move things forward. But for now, drill baby drill, as they say, and we got the goods.
Andrew, and by the way, as a thank you, if you need me to stand there with nibbles and guard against any CFTC or government regulators, if they ever even think of getting in your way, just let me know and I'll come over and I'd be happy to take care of that.
Nevada's an open carry state, so we're always pretty good.
Perfect. We can put a casino and bet on things, all sorts of great prop bets that the CFTC won't regulate. Although, Rob, before we take some questions, I know we did talk a little bit about the Fed meeting that's coming up tomorrow. And I'm sure there'll be questions on this. If people have questions for Andrew and BlackRock, or if people have questions for Rob about BlackRock, or for Rob or Andrew about anything else, start firing those in. But Rob, in terms of the Fed meeting, and Andrew, you can comment on this as well. My strong belief is that while Basel III goes at a snail's British pace, I don't think that nothing happened. And I'll be clear, I cannot verify, prove with signed documents. This is my hypothesis, shall we say. I believe the reset is occurring. I mean, you see the way these metals get driven down. If you look at the chart, you can see it often stays the same spot, but goes down. The next day it comes up. So you're stopping people out. And Rob, you and I and others have talked for years that it was impossible for the Fed to raise rates. They tried at the end of 2018. They got it up to 2.5%, and the whole thing started melting down. So now we have all this stuff happening. They're selling a new wave of COVID boogeymen, which we saw. Andrew, you told us what happened to the silver price last time they shut down things. Now they're threatening to do that again. And I would say in today's hyperinflationary, we're getting 10%, 9% producer inflation reports, 6.8 CPI. So I would say that you could even almost make the case that $22 silver today, with today's money supply, could even be cheaper than $12 silver a year ago. And I know that might sound extreme to some people, but Rob, you've seen those reports. This was months ago where they said 40% of the dollars that are in existence were created in the past year. I wonder if we knew the true numbers, how much money has actually been created. So when you add all of that up, and then the Fed out of left field a couple months ago, they start talking about tightening and raising interest rates. And I'm thinking, all right, well, that's pretty silly. But having studied how headlines are pumped and then dumped so that Fed governors and Goldman Sachs officials can use CNBC and those fraudulent people who are hurting their customers, hurting their country, hurting other countries where people watch that. When you understand how these things are gamed, and if somebody doesn't think that they are and wants to compare evidence, I'm happy to do that. And then you see the US government starting to run out of money. They're hitting their margin call. By the way, debt ceiling tomorrow too. Where's Janet been on that one? And now Joe Manchin, apparently there seems to be one guy in Congress who actually has some integrity. He keeps doing what he can to block it. The last story I read on CNBC this morning is that that's still an open deal. So anyway, if they don't raise it, that's going to be, and on the same time, the Fed. So Rob, long question here. Seems to me they know they're crashing it. That's the only way you can raise interest rates. If, like usual, they know the entire plan ahead. How I don't see how else it could make sense. What do you think?
I think the crash in a lot of ways is like the harvesting. You crash it and you harvest, right? So you build the system up, you build all these valuations, you crash it. They go in, as Rothschild said, buy when there's blood in the streets. Well, if you can create the blood in the streets, that gives you a lot of opportunities. And it sounds perverse, and people say, no, that's conspiracy theory, except for the fact that you understand that when you have this tremendous market power, how did you get there in the first place? You don't just get market power. You legislate it in and you work towards that goal. And that's exactly what they've done. They've worked towards that goal, a certain group of people, right? So at the end of the day,
I'm sorry to interrupt for a second, Rob. You said something about conspiracy theory here. I was pulling up a website. I didn't want to be distracted. Could you help me understand that?
so the way that the elites talk to each other is through like the World Economic Forum, through novels, through Davos, stuff like that. And they're talking openly about the reset. So they know that the system has to reset. They know it. And it's planned. And the IMF has written position papers on their website that says how they're going to do it. It's out in the open. They know they have to do it. They know that we're at the end of the system. But the only problem I have with that, I don't mind them saying, yeah, we need a reset. I think we all know we need a reset. The dollar system is broken. The problem that I have is that they're wanting to design it, but they're not really asking us what the hell we want and what our viewpoint is on this. So we would like to have our viewpoint, and our Congress critters, most of the guys that you said that don't have, and most of them don't have integrity, they don't really tell us. There's not an open conversation. We know the system is dead. It's zombie walking. It has been since 2008, but they're not asking us what we want. And that's the only problem I have with this. Yeah, we're going to have to go through the reset. That's obvious. But the people, we the people, that little thing that we had, in our early history here in the US, we the people are the ones that are supposed to be, who are taken care of and who are guarded. And who ultimately, have the decision-making power. And what they're doing is through those forums, the IMF, the BIS, the World Economic Forum, Davos, all those things, they're taking that power away. And they're saying, we want to do it this way, and you have to do it this way. And they're not looking at all options on the table. That's the issue that I have with it. So yeah, I would expect the world leaders to address the issue, but it's the way that they're addressing it that I have the problem with. And that's not conspiracy theory. They write about it. It's out there. We know, we've seen the articles, we know what they want to do. The central bank digital currencies and all that stuff. I just want them to ask the people and let the people have a voice in it. And if the people want to have alternative monetary systems, they want to go back to gold and silver, they want to do private cryptos, create, local current, whatever they want, that needs to be in play. But you never hear that talked about at the government level, and all of the mouthpieces for these big banks, it wouldn't benefit them. So they go on the CNBCs of the world and the Reuters, and they say, no, we need this system, because they're trying to get people to accept it. And that's why we're here, Chris, is to talk about this, to have an open forum. It's in the Bill of Rights, our right to freedom of assemble and talk about these things and raise awareness. And that's what we do, but we're the only guys doing it. You don't see the financial media doing this. You don't see them talking about it.
Well, that's why there's a new sheriff in town, and I appreciate what you're doing, Rob, and the other people who stand up in any industry. And before we get to the question here, which I think is on many people's mind, came in from Steve W. in the audience that you can both comment on. I'll just say that this is something I felt. I remember thinking about it 6 or 7 years ago, but at least to me, if you replace government with mafia or organized crime, and you think kind of what you saw in Goodfellas or the Godfather movies, to me, that's the only way you start getting a lot of this stuff making sense. This is not people trying to help you. I think Australians who are being trapped down and chased by disturbed people who think they have the right to tell someone else what to put in your body while they go have parties, mocking. They're not wearing masks. And then we find studies that there's codes on the vaccines, and some people get placebos. So there's a lot of information like that I think is going to come out, and I will accept whether people like hearing that or not, and that's fine. But just the only thing I can do in my time on this earth is be honest. That's not the only thing, but I will do that. So anyway, with that said, Andrew, why don't you take this one, because Steve W. has the question that seems to be in a lot of people's minds. Will silver ever reach 30 again? And I'll pull up, we had someone in the Twitter world today. It's so painful. I couldn't be involved anymore. Goodbye, silver. I think a lot of people are feeling that, but that's, you hear it every day. What would you say again on that one, Andrew?
Yeah, listen, despondent is good as an investor, right? Anytime, as Rob said, buy when blood is in the streets. And here it's you want to be, you don't want to, what we have is a commodity that when she goes, she goes. Now, people love the volatility on the way up, and on the way down, they become despondent, and it's almost like self-harm just being an investor every single day. But it's that big beach ball again, jumping off a high diving board. I mean, you when things move, they'll move. You've got to there's just this, get the paper markets out of it. The supply and demand aspects of it all are just say that it can't go much lower than it is here because it'll go below the cost of production for pretty much 70% of the producers out there, meaning even less supply. As there's less supply and as demand continues to increase, prices go up. And when the momentum switches and people start jumping in, this is such a small market that it doesn't really take that much money to move it. And when it goes $30, will it reach $30? Sure. Well, we're at $50 a decade ago. It's amazing how quickly expectations change, but it feels a lot like it did in March, February of 2019. All I can say is that soon after it was euphoric. Now I like the euphoric feeling better, but right now I just say I don't want to be on the wrong side of the trade.
Well, Andrew, you talked about how all the lower price, I mean, I know this doesn't fit with Keynesian economics, but lowers the supply. But if we go back to just February of this year, just 10, 11 months ago, now they lied about it at the time. So that's extra felonies that everyone watching today, don't worry, I will make sure you have access to those files so your lawyers can have it. We'll get a class action suit going. There'll be plenty of options and plenty of evidence. But aside from that, these nitwits, they were actually dumb enough to even admit a couple of months later in their LBMA Silver report, they were getting their doors blown off in February. That's why Ross Benham had to commit a felony.
That's right.
That's why he's afraid to show his face while people are being stolen from day after day after day. But aside from that, here we are 10, 11 months later. Rob, I would say, and I know you talked to a lot of bullion dealers, in terms of like the rate we had for that 3 to 5 days, like if you call that on a scale of 0 to 100, it was like 100. We haven't matched those 3 or 4 days in particular, but we've been at like a 70 or an 80 ever since then. Whereas normally it's a 20 or a 30, especially when the price is getting dropped. I wonder, don't we have to be nearing that break point?
Yeah, we are nearing the break. I think we're nearing a bunch of break points. What I see when I look, not just economically, but when you talk about this gentleman saying it's so painful I had to get out. You're seeing people reaching their frustration point, and it's going to boil over. People are going to they're going to get to the point where they stop accepting the mainstream narrative and they stop accepting crap, from their representatives, from people in the market, from things not making sense. Whether you want to call it manipulation or collusion or whatever the case may be. And they're going to stop accepting it from their government officials. People are at that breaking point. And the question is, are we able to get any honesty in the system before it crashes, or does it crash and then we have to come in and implement a better system? And will, the people be allowed to do it? That's really what I'm interested in seeing, is will the people be allowed to come in and do something about it? Are we going to throw out all these government officials and the bankers, and say, you guys need to stop running our system. We're going to take control of this thing again. That ultimately is what needs to happen. But you're right. People are at the breaking point. The system is at its breaking point. We're at a bunch of breaking points. Getting back to the precious metals, that's why we own them, because that's not only your insurance, it's your protection. It's in a lot of ways your salvation economically. And one other point I'd like to make, I was watching this really cool interview yesterday with Robert Kiyosaki and the founder of Telemundo. And the lady that founded Telemundo was from Cuba. And she said, when I came to the United States, I had nothing and nobody gave me anything, right? She sponsored in by a Christian family, but they had nothing. And they worked very hard to have success. And she said, the thing that was really interesting was, she's like, the only way that you have any voice is to have economic power first. It starts with economic power. In other words, you have to be able to be independent from that system to be able to then have power to change that system. So it starts with making good, sound economic choices. And take this from an immigrant who came to the US with nothing and built, a multi-billion-dollar media empire. She knows what she's talking about. Economically, you have to give yourself power so that nobody can tell you what to do, and you can look at the system and you can start implementing changes. If you're a slave to that system and you've allowed yourself to be a slave to that system and you haven't done anything to protect yourself, it's kind of hard to get out of the system. And it's kind of really hard to complain about the system. You don't have any power. So the ability to affect one's own life starts with economic power. And take it from people who have come to this country and built something from nothing. And now they have a voice. The whole purpose of Telemundo is to give a voice to people that didn't have a voice before. But she had to become economically independent and then teach other people how to do that so that they would have that voice. And that's true of all of us. If we want to have a voice, you have to make good financial decisions. So that's why we talk about the precious metals. It's the only system that sits outside of their paper Ponzi system. It's the only asset class that you can get into.
I agree with you, Rob. And maybe one twist I would add to that before we do have time for one BlackRock question, which I got from the audience here. But just I would caution against people waiting or allowing the government to do this or that. These are people who have no. I've left the U.S. twice. Where can I go on the planet where I legally am not supposed to pay U.S. income tax? They've never helped. They've harmed. So to me, this isn't what I'm going to allow them to do. I don't remember the last time I saw a U.S. dollar. I'll bet if I had to go just on silver, I could do it. So, and if anyone is feeling alone or not sure how to take some of those steps, we talk about it on the channel. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. But Andrew, we have a question for you, and I know we're just about out of time for today. But someone had a question about drilling and any results. So maybe if you could just give us an update on that and how they can contact you and find more information for people who would like to do so.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been drilling at a record clip. I mean, we did 30,000 meters of drilling last year. This year we've done 80,000 meters. We had 4 drill rigs going at the site up until mid-October, and all that drilling. What we're trying to do this year is we made multiple discoveries last year. We're showing new life, and we're coming out with our first resource estimate, our maiden resource estimate early next year in Q1. So all this drilling, the space race of drilling, for lack of a better term, that was all to get the drilling finished. That'll form the basis for the maiden resource estimate. We've got about 20 drill holes or so, maybe more than that, at the lab pending assay, and I'm expecting to have a release out certainly before everyone goes off for the holidays. So in the next week or so, about as imminent as it gets. And that's going to form the basis for a resource estimate. So, we're still drilling at the project right now. In fact, we're on our last drill hole of the year. There's going to be more news flow through, January, I'd say, of drill results in addition to what we released this month. And then we've got our maiden resource estimate to look forward to probably sometime in February, March at the latest. And that's going to be the biggest catalyst we've ever had since we made our discovery last year. And I'm really looking forward to that, because once we have these ounces in the ground, the project becomes like a paint by numbers approach to de-risking it and adding value to it from there. But we think we're really going to shock the market in terms of both size and the grade. And what makes us stand out, is the fact that we're not with you down in Mexico, and we're not in Peru, where they're having everyone there just getting clobbered by the governments. And in Nevada, we're on private land there, halfway between Las Vegas and Reno, and our drill rigs are set up next to the interstate. So it doesn't get much better than that. I think we'll have a huge target on our back once we get this resource out next year. And in the interim, just nothing but news. As I said, drill results certainly before Christmas comes. We're looking at metallurgy too, so we should have some stuff on that, because it's not just the ounces in the ground, it's what you can extract. So I think there should be a fair amount coming down the pipeline, and I'm expecting next year to be even bigger.
And we'll be looking forward to keeping track of that, and you'll join us again soon here, hopefully. And Rob, as a silver stock investor and analyst, obviously you're familiar with BlackRock today. Andrew's shared a bit more. Is there anything in particular that, at least as you follow BlackRock, that you are looking towards or that you're keeping an eye on that people should be aware of?
Yeah, the thing about BlackRock is they keep building, and it's not only ounces. They've added several people to their management team who have a lot of experience. People have been directors of other corporations. So they have a world-class management team. They happen to be in the #1 ranked mining district in the world, according to the Fraser Institute. And they've got high-grade silver. And even though they've done well compared to other companies in this space, as silver has fallen, they're still undervalued to net asset value of what they're going to have in the ground. So what you're looking at here with this company is somebody's going to be able to execute. And like I said, either they can build the mine or somebody's take them out. I mean, I think at some point, one of these majors has come in, and when they get the resource defined the next couple of years, and with the dynamics of silver being what they are, and them seeing the writing on the wall, one of the majors is going to come in and make a bid. And whether BlackRock gets to build their own mine or not, I guess depends on how good that offer is. But, I don't, when you find good silver companies in the US, Mexico, North America, especially, you don't turn them away. You invest in them. Those are going to be some of the best investments you can have, period.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you go. And gentlemen, we're about to wrap up, but Rob, can you let folks know how they can get access to the great information you share? If there are any people at home watching who want to hit the share button now and then go over to your site and find out more about your relationship with Jeff Christian of CPM Group, what is the best way to do that?
You just go to goldsilverpros.com. We just redesigned the website. We're really proud of it. It's got links there to people who stack precious metals and want physical. We have 4 different companies we're doing affiliations with right now that they can get special deals. All you do is click on the button for the company you want, automatically sends them an email, and they'll handle your processing from there. They'll get in contact with you. Of course, go to Gold Silver Pros on YouTube. And if you want to support us on everything we do in the channel, go to patreon.com/Gold Silver Pros.
And I love this photo. It looks like, you're focused in a conversation, but then there's digital side Rob, always keeping an eye on CPM's latest moves. So thank you, Rob of goldsilverpros.com. And Andrew, if people have questions about BlackRock, or if they want to get your autograph and talk to you about what was it like seeing Rob put that Weasley banker in his place, how can they find you?
BlackRockSilver.com, or we're trading under the symbol BKRRF on the OTC and BRC on the Toronto Venture Exchange. So there you go.
And it looks like we also have info@blackrocksilver.com, and they can call 604-817-6044. So Andrew, I sure appreciate you being here, shedding light on the silver market, on BlackRock. Again, it's been quite an honor, especially as things have developed where now I can be very selective about who we do partner with. And it's great to have someone with integrity and the ability to keep going in these markets. Every analyst I bring on that knows infinitely more about mining stock analysis than me has spoken quite favorably about your project, like Rob or Dave Kranzler. And I just thank you for being a part of what we're doing here. Yeah, you remember we've had plenty of talks with him. Anyway, I just appreciate what you stand for and how you conduct yourself in this environment. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this all looks like on the other side. And my guess is it might be sooner than later. So I thank you both for that. And everyone at home watching, thank you for being here today and making the show what it is. Go ahead and hit that share button if you had fun today so others can see this and be warned of what's happening before Ross Benham goes to jail. But with that said, we're going to wrap up, and I will see you again soon.